Grace and peace to you from Grace Church on the Hill in Toronto. How are you doing? How are you coping in this lockdown? It's not easy for any people. But we have resources. As Christians, we have, of course, Scripture. We have the lives of the saints to encourage us. And one of the great saints for me is the Reverend George Herbert, a priest-poet of the Church of England. He even has a special day in the Anglican calendar. St. David's Day he died. He was a Welshman. He gave up riches and fame, influence. He renounced it all and became a lowly rural country parish priest, served his people, and he died 3 years after he was ordained. But he's considered one of the greatest poets of the English treasury of poets. And his most famous poem, I think, is simply called Love. Love, for he was certainly a poet of love. He was deeply in love with the God who loved him for who he was, warts and all. A God who knew him inside out and thoroughly and still accepted him and embraced him. So all his poems are imbued with this confident love in God. Unlike his friend, the poet-priest John Donne, who was tortured by his understanding of God, was always deeply fearful of God. There's none of that in Herbert at all. Herbert is deeply safe and at home in God. The poet Edwin Muir, who was brought up in a very harsh, severe Calvinist Presbyterian tradition, wrote that God was the 3 angry letters in a little black book. Oh, God forbid that should be the God we worship. 3 angry letters in a little black book. That little black Bible with those 3 angry letters. No. This is not Herbert's God at all. Certainly not the God of Jesus Christ. So you know the parable in the Bible where a great wedding feast was offered and the guests were invited and no one showed up? That parable of the wedding banquet lies in the background of Herbert's poem, Love. He never mentions God, he never mentions Christ, he never mentions Jesus. Love is the shorthand for the God we worship. So here's this most wonderful poem by George Herbert. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful? Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says Love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says Love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. A magical poem of our withdrawal from God's invitation and welcome and loving embrace, our pride getting in the way, but the insistent love. I'll look after it. Like a great head waiter, I'll look after it. Don't worry. Come on in, sit down, you're welcome. The meal's prepared. Come, feast. You belong. Of course, it's a metaphor for the Eucharist, which is central to the Church's liturgical life. Unfortunately, this time we can't physically meet to share the Eucharist, to come to this wedding feast. In the meantime, I've tried to read George Herbert's poem, Love, just to remind me what's really going on here. To remind me that I am, though unworthy, an invited guest, always welcomed by love. May we know this deeply, truly, spiritually in this time of exile. And then, when the chains are thrown off, we may once again return to the great feast, the banquet held in our honor. Love bids you welcome. Grace and peace to you all.